Babes, welcome back. By the time you hear this, it'll be Tuesday. And babes, we see you, we love you, and babes, we hope you have an amazing day.
Because, babes, tonight we realized retirement home gossip might actually be messier than Bravo.
Oh my God, literally messier. Like Snark Squad, if you only knew the evening we just had. I am still, I'm emotionally and intellectually processing the events of the last few hours.
I feel like I need a nap and a therapy session.
Totally. Because we went to visit Joan and Felicia,
Right.
Our reigning, undisputed, original Snark queens of the assisted living facility. And let me tell you, the atmosphere in that recreation room was just, it was thick with judgment.
Palpable, like you walk in and you instantly feel the sociological hierarchy of the room. Joan and Felicia, they don't just participate in their community, you know? They rule it through sheer observational terror.
Yes. Oh my God. They were sitting at their corner table playing gin rummy. And the moment Joan spotted us, she didn't even break her shovel. She just looked over her reading glasses and delivered a read so precise I felt like I was in surgery.
Surgical precision. She basically asked if we had finally secured adequate romantic partners or if we were still just, talking into the void of the internet.
Bestie, I was devastated because it was accurate. And the irony is we went in there seeking sanctuary.
Right, we were looking for comfort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We went in hoping for a little maternal nurturing after the absolute psychological warfare that was our own mother's behavior during this past weekend's Mother's Day brunch. Listeners, I need to know if it's just our families or if Mother's Day acts as some sort of astrological trigger for maternal entitlement because we barely survived Saturday.
We really need to contextualize this brunch for the Snark Squad because it perfectly explains the baseline trauma we carried right into Joan and Felicia's domain.
Please set the scene because I am getting highs just thinking about it.
Okay, so we were at this highly aesthetic, overpriced bistro. You know, the exact business model, right? The exposed ductwork, the Edison bulbs, a menu where a side of bacon requires a small bank loan.
So expensive for literally 2 eggs.
Right. And before the waiter even has a chance to distribute the water glasses, your mother looks at this 20-something kid and interrogates him about the ethical sourcing of the eggs.
Oh my God, yes.
Claiming that pale yolks trigger her seasonal affective disorder.
I wanted the floorboards to open up and swallow me whole. I really did. The poor waiter was frozen. And then instead of, de-escalating the situation, my mother decides to utilize a different strategy entirely.
A completely unhinged strategy.
Totally unhinged. She leans in completely unprompted and tells the waiter to ignore the egg commentary, but demands to know his relationship status because his jawline is, quote-unquote, genetically superior.
I have never seen a busboy vibrate with so much terror.
He was shaking. It wasn't a meal. It was a hostage negotiation with a side of hollandaise.
So naturally, we relayed this exact sequence of events to Joan and Felicia, fully expecting, a bit of generational solidarity.
Right. Like mothers can be overwhelming. Tell us we're right.
Exactly. We thought they would comfort us. But no. Felicia takes a slow, deliberate sip of her decaf, looks right at me, and systematically dismantles our mother's entire approach.
It was chilling.
She essentially said that if you are unhappy with the service, complaining to a 20-year-old kid is a cowardly move. In her era, you marched into the kitchen and intimidated the head chef yourself.
Alpha energy. Pure alpha.
And as for the flirting, she found it deeply amateurish.
I was absolutely breathless. They operate on a completely different frequency of ruthlessness. It was incredibly validating yet simultaneously terrifying. But here is where the cultural disconnect really showcased itself.
The big pivot.
Yeah, because we eventually had to explain that we couldn't stay for bingo. We had to rush back to our respective couches because it was a Tuesday, which means the new episode of Top Chef was airing.
And you could physically see the confusion wash over their faces. It was a complete paradigm clash.
Total glitch in the Matrix.
Felicia adjusted her cardigan and cheerfully assumed we were talking about a Food Network program. She started talking about how much she loves baking competitions because they are soothing, polite, and everyone is just happily constructing fruit pies in a tent.
I felt my blood pressure spike. I tried to gently correct the record. I looked at them and said, no, this isn't a pastoral English baking show. This is Bravo. This is high-stakes psychological warfare masquerading as a culinary arts competition.
Right, this is not about friendship.
Exactly. This is people sobbing into a blast chiller over a broken emulsion, which, Snark Squad, for those who don't spend their lives obsessing over culinary mechanics, an emulsion is when you force 2 unmixable liquids like oil and water to bind together.
Usually using egg yolks, like in a
Yeah.
mayonnaise.
Right. And when it breaks, the oil separates out. It looks like a greasy, curdled nightmare, and it completely ruins your dish. It's panic-inducing.
But explaining that level of kitchen panic to an octogenarian is nearly impossible. Joan looked at us with genuine bewilderment and asked, "Where is the drama in a soup? Food is love."
Food is love.
Huh.
I mean, I love that for her, but no.
It really forced me to analyze the evolution of viewing habits. Older generations view cooking programs as educational, parasocial comfort. They want Julia Child teaching them how to confidently roast a chicken. They don't want a 28-year-old sous chef having a full-blown existential crisis over the structural integrity of a scallop.
Exactly. It's about the expectation of the medium. They expect television to model perfect, polite behavior. But we, the chronically online reality TV addicts, we expect television to act as a pressure cooker that forces human beings to their absolute breaking point.
Which is why we thrive on Bravo.
Totally. Which honestly sent us into a massive spiral on the drive back to the studio. Because trying to bridge that gap with Joan and Felicia made me ask a really fundamental question. Like, do we think reality TV has actually gotten more dramatic over the past 2 decades, or has it gotten completely sanitized?
Well, if we look at the structural history of the genre, it's undeniable that the landscape has shifted. We move from feral unpredictability to highly curated lifestyle narratives.
I miss the feral days.
Think back to the mid-2000s VH1 era. Shows like Flavor of Love, Rock of Love, Charm School. That wasn't just reality TV, it was a psychological endurance test.
It was lawless. I get so nostalgic for that specific flavor of chaos. There was no HR department intervening. You had people fighting over novelty clocks worn as necklaces.
A truly wild accessory choice.
Right. You had iconic culture-shifting moments like Pumpkin physically spitting on Tiffany New York Pollard.
Yeah.
That moment altered the trajectory of pop culture. People weren't competing for brand deals or trying to launch a line of neutral-tone athleisure wear. They were driven by pure, desperate survival. It was uncalculated emotion.
I hear your nostalgia, but let's critically analyze why that era feels different. The early 2000s MTV model, The Real World, the early challenge seasons, that succeeded because it was a sociological experiment.
Yeah, putting strangers in a house.
Exactly. You remove all external stimuli, introduce alcohol, and watch the social contract dissolve. They didn't know how to self-produce. Modern Bravo, however, is a completely different mechanism. The Housewives ecosystem, Vanderpump Rules. This is high-budget, multi-season cinematic storytelling.
It is, but...
The drama is calculated, yes, but it's incredibly sophisticated. Cast members are leaking stories to the press months in advance to seed a storyline for a reunion that won't air until the following year.
But see, I completely reject that makes it better. The calculation is exactly the problem. I don't want a housewife practicing her witty comeback in the mirror with her PR team. I want the authentic, lived-in mess of someone absolutely losing their mind because a roommate ate their leftover peanut butter.
You want the raw meltdowns.
I do. Today's streaming reality stars on shows like Love is Blind or Buried, the traders are hyper-aware of cancel culture and engagement metrics. They are playing a sterilized character.
That is true. They are very aware of the cameras.
If you took an influencer from a modern Netflix dating show and dropped them into the 2005 Flavor of Love house, it would be like dropping a freshwater goldfish into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They simply lack the biological tools to survive that level of toxicity.
You are romanticizing the toxicity, but from a narrative perspective, the slow burn betrayal of a modern Bravo scandal, where we have a decade of backstory, provides a much deeper psychological payoff. The early reality stars walked so modern reality titans could run.
I vehemently disagree, and we are going to have to circle back to this debate later, because right now, all this talk about the evolution of trash television has severely depleted my blood sugar, and we cannot tackle the emotional toll of this week's Top Chef recap without our baseline biological needs being met.
The baseline must absolutely be established.
Because, babes, the wine is on deck. Hello, Barefoot Moscato. And babes, for anyone wondering, yes, we are currently eating Mexican street corn dip with chips. And babes, it's so good.
It is structurally flawless. And for the Snark Squad listening, we need to emphasize that watching high-stress culinary television requires a very specific biological counterweight.
Oh, totally.
When you are watching professional chefs actively hyperventilate over a fillet of fish, your own sympathetic nervous system engages. You experience secondhand adrenaline. The only way to combat that is by grounding yourself with complex carbohydrates and dairy.
It is a scientific fact. Dips, specifically, are the elite tier of emotional healing. Think about the mechanics of a dip. It requires participation.
It is an active food.
Exactly. You aren't just passively chewing. You are selecting the structural vehicle, like the perfect heavily salted tortilla chip, and plunging it into a warm, creamy, spicy abyss. It's an active coping mechanism. And this street corn dip, it is doing heavy lifting right now.
Let's break down why this specific flavor profile works. Mexican street corn, or esquites when served in a cup or as a dip, relies on a precarious balance of fat and acid.
My favorite duo.
You have a heavy, lipid-rich base of mayonnaise, sour cream, and cotija cheese. If you just ate that, it would coat your palate and become cloying. But the sharp acidity of the fresh lime juice and the heat of the chili powder slice right through that fat, resetting your taste buds with every bite.
It's a journey for the mouth.
And the char on the corn adds a bitter, smoky element that grounds the sweetness of the kernels. Honestly, it is a masterclass in flavor balancing that several of the chefs on this week's episode desperately needed to study.
Oh my God, the shade. Do not let Tom Colicchio hear you praising a dip made with mayonnaise. He will burst through the studio wall and demand we clarify the origin of the eggs.
He would absolutely interrogate us.
But truly, we needed this sustenance to survive what we just watched. Season 23, Week 10. The episode is titled Hook, Line, and Dinner, and it was a masterclass in hubris, panic, and questionable decision-making. So let's pour another glass of this Moscato, secure a chip, and transition into the recap.
Let's unpack the timeline. The episode opens with the remaining 7 chefs waking up in their South Carolina house. The vibe is relatively calm until they discover a note left by host Kristen Kish.
The dreaded note.
It instructs them to meet at a location called Green Pond Landing, and she signs off with the phrase, "Chop chop,"
which immediately triggers a collective, visceral panic response in the room. Because in the Top Chef cinematic universe, chop chop is never just a breezy farewell.
It's what?
It is a veiled threat. It implies an aggressive time constraint or a brutal knife skills challenge. But we have to talk about Duyen, our fierce, incredibly intense competitor, Mama Dwayne. Her reaction to this note is a fascinating psychological study.
He was so out of pocket.
She reads, "Chop chop." And she genuinely, without a hint of irony, concludes that they are going to be handed literal machetes to hack their way through the South Carolina wilderness.
Her delusion was spectacular. She was practically vibrating with adrenaline, fully visualizing a survivalist scenario.
She was ready for war.
It actually speaks volumes about how reality competition shows condition their participants. They are kept in such a state of perpetual anxiety and sensory deprivation that their brains automatically leap to the most catastrophic slasher movie outcome. She wasn't preparing to cook, she was preparing for combat.
I am obsessed with her baseline intensity. She is so iconic. But the reality is significantly less cinematic. They arrive at Lake Hartwell, which looks stunning, and there are no machetes in sight.
Sadly.
Right. It's just Kristen, head judge Tom Colicchio, and Gail Simmons standing by the water. And we have to acknowledge Tom's aura here, because it was jarring.
Oh, Tom Colicchio, near a body of water, undergoes a complete physiological transformation.
Literally a different man.
He shed his usual intimidating, arms-crossed kitchen persona and was radiating an overwhelming retired dad on a weekend fishing trip energy. He was wearing performance outdoor gear. You could visibly see his blood pressure drop. He was in his element.
He absolutely had a hidden tackle box waiting off camera. But Kristen shatters the peaceful illusion by announcing the beloved quickfire challenge. The mise en place race.
A classic.
A total classic. Mise en place is a French culinary phrase meaning putting in place. It's the hyper-organized preparation of all your ingredients before you actually start cooking. But because we are deep into the season, they introduce a structural twist. It's a team event, capture the flag style.
Teams of 3. First team to win 3 prep rounds gets to compete in an individual cook-off for a $10,000 cash prize.
Sponsored by Finish Dish Detergent. Get that coin, bravo.
We always respect the aggressive product placement integration. Now, we must remember Laurence has a fast pass immunity from winning the previous elimination challenge, so he gets to completely bypass the manual labor and sit comfortably on the sidelines.
Must be nice.
The remaining 6 draw knives, we get Team Blue, Sherry, Jonathan, and Anthony, facing off against Team Red, Seeger, Duyen, and Rhoda.
The panic immediately sets in with round 1. They are tasked with seeding and hulling a pint of Scuppernong grapes. And listeners, I will admit my own culinary blind spot here. I had absolutely no idea what a Scuppernong was until this exact moment in television history.
You aren't alone. They're a variety of muscadine grape, heavily native to the American South, and specifically the state fruit of North Carolina.
Look at you with the facts.
Always. Unlike a standard grocery store grape, scuppernongs have an incredibly thick, almost leathery skin and massive seeds. Attempting to peel and seed a pint of them under a ticking clock is a textural and logistical nightmare. They pair Jonathan against Seeger for this round.
And this is where Jonathan secures his status as an absolute mad scientist. He looks at these thick-skinned, stubborn grapes, and his brain bypasses all traditional prep methods. He decides to load a basket with these grapes and literally drops them into a vat of boiling deep fryer oil.
It was a shocking maneuver.
I screamed. I thought he lost his mind.
It looks crazy, but let's explain the thermodynamics of why this is actually a brilliant, albeit terrifying, culinary hack.
Break it down for us.
By dropping the grapes into extremely hot oil for just a few seconds, the natural moisture sitting just beneath the skin instantly turns to steam. That steam expands rapidly, separating the thick hull from the flesh of the fruit.
Wow.
He then immediately plunges them into an ice bath, a process known as thermal shock. The ice bath immediately halts the cooking process so the interior of the grape doesn't turn to mush. The skin just slips right off.
It is a high-wire act. Like if he leaves them in the oil for 3 seconds too long, he serves Tom Colicchio a blistered, exploded grape.
A total disaster.
But it works. Jonathan wins the round for Team Blue. However, the true narrative highlight of this round wasn't the thermal shock. It was the psychological warfare happening on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Yes, Duyen is watching Jonathan before he figures out the fryer trick, and she loudly, casually yells out, "Want me to phone a friend? I can call Brandon."
The sheer audacity of that statement. For context, Brandon is a chef who was eliminated earlier in the season.
She just brought up a ghost to haunt him.
Duyen is weaponizing a fallen competitor's name just to rattle Jonathan's focus. It is textbook psychological disruption. She is standing there, smiling, actively trying to dismantle his confidence.
The fans on Reddit were hyperventilating over this. It is exactly the kind of cutthroat, mean girl but make it charming energy that we crave. She understands that the competition isn't just on the cutting board, it's in the mind.
She is playing chess.
Exactly. But Duyen doesn't just talk a big game, because round 2 is peeling and deveining 12 shrimp, and it's Duyen going up against Sherry. Now, the editors have heavily established that Sherry only operates on a turbo setting, but Duyen steps up to that station and completely obliterates her.
Deveining shrimp requires precision. You have to score the back and remove the digestive tract without mangling the flesh. Duyen's knife work was mechanical in its efficiency.
She is a machine. She ties the score up for Team Red, 1-1. Round 3 moves to cracking and picking 1 ounce of pecans. Jonathan is back up against Seeger.
And here we see the fatal flaw of brute force versus situational awareness.
Jonathan was just going to town.
He is cracking these pecan shells by hand, moving at lightning speed, crushing them like a lumberjack. But he gets tunnel vision. He isn't watching his scale.
Classic mistake.
Seeger, taking a much more methodical, paced approach, hits exactly 1 ounce and calls check, while Jonathan is still mindlessly cracking.
It's the classic tortoise and the hare dynamic. Speed is irrelevant if you fail to monitor the parameters of the challenge. Team Red takes a 2-1 lead, which brings us to the final, high-stakes round, shucking and kerneling 5 ears of corn. Rhoda steps up against Anthony.
Rhoda was not playing.
Rhoda drops her head, channels pure, unadulterated focus, rips through the corn, and secures the final point. Team Red wins the flag.
Team Blue is visually shattered. Sherry looks like she is contemplating walking directly into the lake.
I felt so bad for her. But Team Red, Seeger, Duyen, and Rhoda, they now join the rested Laurence for a 20-minute individual cook to secure the $10,000. They must feature the grapes, shrimp, pecans, and corn.
And listeners, 20 minutes in a high-stakes kitchen is nothing.
It's literally a blink.
It is exactly enough time to formulate a concept, panic, execute it poorly, and plate it. Let's analyze the bottom of this quickfire first.
Yes, let's get into the mess.
Laurence attempts a corn, pecan, and shrimp chow mein with scuppernong pickles. The judge's immediate critique is that the dish is overwhelmingly sweet.
Too sweet for Top Chef.
Always a kiss of death. And then we have Seeger. Seeger attempts an ajo blanco. For context, an ajo blanco is a traditional Spanish cold soup, essentially a white gazpacho, historically made from crushed almonds, bread, garlic, olive oil, and vinegar. Seeger substitutes the almonds with toasted pecans and throws in the shrimp and grapes.
But the execution was a disaster. The judges immediately clogged the visual. Tom notes that it looks like spa food.
Ouch.
And not the luxurious kind. It looked like the kind of ascetic, punishing food you get at a wellness retreat where you aren't allowed to chew.
Yeah.
But the real crime was the flavor profile. Bestie, It was an absolute garlic bomb.
This is a classic chemical error in the kitchen. Raw garlic contains an organosulfur compound called allicin, which is what gives garlic its aggressive, biting heat.
I love learning this stuff.
When you aggressively crush or blend raw garlic for a cold soup like ajo blanco without properly tempering it, either by blanching the cloves first or balancing it with enough fat and acid, the allicin completely overwhelms the palate. It literally burns the tongue.
So bad.
You couldn't taste the delicate scuppernong grapes or the sweetness of the corn. You could only taste defensive chemical compounds.
A completely fatal flaw. Tom's face said it all. But the top two were spectacular. Duyen created a butter-poached shrimp with a pecan romesco and charred corn.
A romesco is a brilliant use of the pecans, substituting them for the traditional almonds or hazelnuts in the Spanish sauce.
So smart. But it was Rhoda who claimed the ultimate victory. She presented a warm corn, pecan, and shrimp salad tied together with a scuppernong and tamarind vinaigrette.
Rhoda's dish was an exercise in perfect structural balance. Tamarind is a pod-like fruit that yields a deeply sour, slightly sweet paste.
Just so good.
By using tamarind as the acidic base of her vinaigrette, she provided enough sharpness to cut through the heavy, fatty richness of the toasted pecans and the natural sugars of the corn and shrimp. It was cohesive. Rhoda takes the win and the 10 grand.
We were cheering. We love a redemption arc.
Yeah.
But then, you guys, the episode pivots from culinary triumph into a deep existential quarter-life crisis.
It got so heavy so fast.
Whiplash. The camera cuts to Rhoda's solo confessional interview. She's holding this novelty check, and she just emotionally unloads. She starts explaining that she is over 40, she hasn't kept a man, she hasn't given her parents grandchildren, and she desperately needed this professional monetary win to serve as a distraction for her family. Vesti, I had to pause the television. I felt my chest tighten.
It was an incredibly raw display of milestone anxiety. She perfectly articulated the sociological pressure placed specifically on unmarried women in their late 30s and 40s.
It is so real.
Society, and often families, view a woman's timeline through a very rigid matrix of marriage and reproduction. Rhoda is essentially stating that she uses her extreme professional competence as a shield to deflect inquiries about her personal life. She is offering up a tamarind vinaigrette to appease the societal gods of domesticity.
It is the ultimate coping mechanism. Like, please look at this $10,000 prize so you stop asking questions about my uterus.
Literally.
It is heartbreaking, but deeply validating to see someone speak that specific truth on a platform like Bravo. Women pour their entire identities into their careers because it is the one metric of success they can physically control. But of course, the duality of the Bravo fandom immediately presented itself online.
Oh, the internet never fails to miss the point. While Rhoda is having a profound, vulnerable breakthrough about the inescapable pressures of biological aging and societal expectations, the entire Top Chef Reddit community was in an absolute frenzy purely because they had no idea she was over 40.
The cognitive dissonance of the internet. The threads were flooded with people demanding her skincare routine.
Drop the routine, Rhoda.
Exactly. Because she has literally zero visible pores. She looks 28. The fans are listening to her pour her heart out about the trauma of aging, and their only takeaway is, what serums are you layering at night?
It is peak reality TV viewer behavior. We hear your emotional trauma, but more importantly, drop the Sephora link.
Priorities. Priorities dictate the discourse. So Rhoda takes her win and her existential dread, and Kristen transitions the group to the elimination challenge. This is where Tom's fishing gear finally makes sense. Welcome to the Top Chef Fishing Derby.
The logistical nightmare.
Totally. The chefs are paired with professional anglers on Lake Hartwell, and they have exactly 60 minutes to catch fish. Whatever species and quantity they pull out of the lake is exactly what they must use to cook for the guest judges at the Abyss restaurant the next day.
Let's talk about the logistics of this challenge, because it's terrifying. You are taking highly trained, Type A culinary professionals who rely on exact measurements, temperature control, and premium sourcing, and you are stripping away all their agency.
Taking away all their control.
You are putting them on a speedboat and telling them their survival in this competition relies entirely on whether a wild bass decides to bite a lure within a 60-minute window. It introduces an uncontrollable variable into a skill-based competition.
And to elevate the stakes, there are extreme advantages on the line. The chef who catches the smallest fish earns an extra $5 for their Whole Foods ingredient budget. The chef who catches the most fish earns an extra $50.
Which is huge for Whole Foods.
Huge. But the grand prize, the chef who catches the largest fish, earns a massive 30 minutes of extra cook time in the kitchen. In the Top Chef universe, 30 extra minutes is the equivalent of being handed a winning lottery ticket.
It completely alters what techniques you are capable of executing. You can braise, you can bake, it's a game changer.
So the boats take off, and we witness the absolute ascension of Mama Twain. Duyen taps into a frequency of competitive focus that is almost frightening.
She is dialed in.
She is not just passively holding a fishing rod, she is psychically demanding the lake surrender to her. And she squeaks the monetary advantages. She catches the smallest fish, which is hilariously tiny, and she catches the highest volume of fish. She walks away with an extra $55 for her budget.
She is a hyper-focused machine. Meanwhile, Jonathan, our deep-frying innovator, hooks the largest fish of the day, securing that vital 30 minutes of extra cook time.
The rich get richer.
But the law of averages dictates that someone must fail. And that falls on Laurence and Rhoda. Despite their best efforts, their lines remain empty. They are entirely skunked. They catch zero fish.
The panic I felt for them. Imagine having to face Tom Colicchio with the plate of aggressively seasoned tap water because you couldn't catch a bass.
Just serving an empty bowl.
Right. Thankfully, production intervened to prevent a complete structural failure of the episode. The professional anglers gifted Laurence and Rhoda 3 spotted bass each, ensuring they actually had a protein to cook.
So the chefs dock, and they head to Whole Foods to conceptualize their dishes. And this grocery store run provides fascinating insight into camp dynamics.
Oh, it was so revealing.
Duyen, who just secured a $55 advantage, notices that Sherry and Rhoda are struggling to afford the ingredients they need to execute their visions. Instead of hoarding her wealth to secure her own dominance, Duyen actually uses her surplus money to purchase ingredients for her competitors.
Bestie, I could have wept.
Yeah,
It is the duality of Duyen.
it really is.
Like, she will ruthlessly threaten to phone a friend to destroy your focus during a quickfire.
Yeah.
But when the dust settles, she reverts to a nurturing, maternal provider. She wants to beat you at your absolute best, not because you couldn't afford a bundle of lemongrass.
It is the complex, contradictory human behavior we watch this show for.
Totally. It was a moment of pure culinary camaraderie, but the Whole Foods aisles also delivered an elite moment of shade.
Oh my God, Seeger and Sherry.
Yes. Seeger is casually walking next to Sherry, and out of nowhere, he asks her what his Real Housewives of Greenville tagline would be. Let's pause right here. The meta-awareness of Seeger to ask for a Housewives tagline proves he acutely understands the Bravo ecosystem.
He knows his brand.
He does. But Sherry, who we established operates strictly on turbo, doesn't even break her stride. She doesn't ponder the question. She just deadpans, dirtier than a dirty martini.
It was a spectacular read. It sounds like a compliment on the surface, implying a sophisticated, slightly scandalous persona, but the undertone is a direct critique of his chaotic, messy energy.
To appreciate.
Sherry is the stealth sniper of this cast. She drops a perfectly calibrated verbal bomb and just keeps walking toward the produce section.
Iconic. So they secure their groceries, and the next day, they arrive at the Abyss restaurant. They have 90 minutes to cook. And the kitchen immediately descends into what we can only describe as pinbone panic.
Let's explain why 90 minutes is a brutal timeline for this specific task. Breaking down a whole fish is not like searing a pre-cut steak.
It's so much work.
You have to scale it, gut it, fillet it, and then you have to deal with the pin bones.
Pan bones.
Pin bones are a series of tiny, needle-like, free-floating bones buried deep within the muscle tissue of the fish. You cannot cut them out without destroying the fillet. You have to run your fingers over the flesh, locate them blindly by touch, and individually extract them with heavy-duty tweezers.
That sounds miserable.
It is a meticulous, agonizingly slow process, and if you miss even one, a judge could choke on it. Doing this under stadium lights with a countdown clock is a recipe for a mental breakdown.
And we see that breakdown manifest in Sherry. Sherry decides to lean into her heritage and prepares a green curry accompanied by a papaya salad. She explains that this flavor profile is deeply personal. It was the first-time meal she sought out after immigrating to the U.S.
A beautiful story.
It is. But as she is cooking, she begins to audibly spiral. She's complaining to the camera operators, frustrated, saying she has lost the thread of what the judges actually want from her.
It is deeply uncomfortable to watch because we are witnessing the psychological breaking point of a competitor. When a chef starts second-guessing their own palate based on inconsistent feedback from the judging panel, they enter a state of paralysis.
They stop trusting themselves.
Exactly. She's no longer cooking her food. She is trying to reverse engineer an imaginary dish that she thinks will appease Tom Colicchio. That lack of conviction always translates to the plate.
You have to cook your truth. Look at Jonathan. Jonathan possesses the extra 30 minutes. He has an hour and a half to construct a masterpiece. He could braise, he could sous vide, he could build a complex, multi-tiered architectural wonder. And what does he decide to do?
He makes a taco.
He decides to make a taco. A single, solitary, beer-battered fish taco.
The sheer audacity of the concept. But let's analyze the strategy. By choosing a deceptively simple item, he is raising the execution stakes to an astronomical level.
It has to be perfect.
He utilizes that extra 30 minutes to obsessively calibrate the temperature of his fryer oil, ensuring the batter shatters perfectly upon impact. He makes the tortillas entirely from scratch. He builds an avocado mousse and a chipotle remoulade. It is a massive risk. If a single element is flawed, he goes home for lack of ambition.
It is the ultimate flex. It is walking into a black tie gala wearing perfectly tailored vintage sweatpants.
A great analogy.
Right. Meanwhile, Laurence is taking a completely different approach. He is relying on heavy emotional manipulation. He decides to prepare a traditional Cantonese steamed fish.
Here comes the romance.
He explains to the cameras that this is the exact dish he cooked for his wife on their first date when they were young international students in China. He talks about the aromatics, the ginger, the scallions, and the technique of pouring smoky hot oil over the fish right before serving to blister the skin.
It is a beautiful story. But from a purely analytical reality TV production standpoint, the moment that confessional aired, the mystery of the episode vanished. This is the quintessential winner's edit.
Oh, 100%.
Editors do not dedicate precious screen time to a sweeping romantic origin story featuring sizzling hot oil unless that chef is taking home the victory. It is narrative structure 101.
You are absolutely right about the formula, but I am a victim of it every single time. I was swooning. I was practically weeping into my street corn dip.
You fall for it every time.
I do. But our romantic high was violently interrupted by the tragedy unfolding at Duyen Station.
Let's examine Duyen's critical failure. She attempts a con chua, a traditional Vietnamese hot and sour soup characterized by a tamarind-infused broth, pineapple, tomatoes, and aromatics.
It sounded so good.
The concept is brilliant. The broth itself requires immense skill to balance the sweet, sour, and savory elements. But Duyen allows hubris to dictate her timing.
She gets overconfident. She misjudges the residual heat of her broth and the density of the spotted base. She waits far too long to drop the fish into the liquid to poach. And to compound the error, she leaves the skin on the fillet.
Leaving the skin on a poached fish is a highly debatable technique. Fish skin contains a high amount of collagen. When exposed to heat, that collagen shrinks.
It gets weird.
If it's not seared quickly in a pan to crisp it, the skin becomes rubbery and acts as an impermeable barrier, preventing the heat of the broth from penetrating the flesh of the fish. As the clock ticks down, Duyen attempts to peel the skin back, and it absolutely refuses to budge. The proteins haven't coagulated, the fish is raw.
The terror in her eyes when she realized the mistake, it was agonizing. But time is called, hands go up, and the chefs must present to the judging panel in the Abyss dining room.
The Walk of Doom.
They are serving Kristen, Tom, Gail, guest chef James London, and the incredible actress Danielle Brooks, who brought such a vibrant, joyful energy to the table. Let's dissect the judges' table, starting with the triumphs.
Rhoda presents her pan-seared base, accompanied by a fennel puree, an artichoke baragoule, and a meunière sauce. A baragoule is traditionally a Provençal dish of artichokes braised with onions, garlic, and carrots in a white wine broth. The judges praise the dish as a triumph of classical French technique. Rhoda firmly establishes that her quick-fire win was not a fluke.
We love that for her. And Anthony. He serves his spotted base with a poblano agouti sauce and yassa.
Agouti refers to the protein-rich seeds of certain melon plants native to West Africa, which are dried, ground, and used to thicken and flavor soups and stews. Ty specifically highlights the focus and clarity of the dish.
And then we get to the taco.
The taco of audacity.
Jonathan presents his single beer-battered masterpiece, and the judges absolutely lose their minds. The gamble pays off
It
spectacularly.
was a massive hit.
They praise the profound crunch of the batter and how the sharp acidity of the slaw cuts through the inherent richness of the deep-fried fish. They acknowledge the immense swagger required to serve something so conceptually simple and execute it so flawlessly.
But Lawrence's romantic narrative reaches its inevitable conclusion. He presents the Cantonese steamed fish. Danielle Brooks takes one bite, physically shimmies in her chair, and declares the dish bussin'.
The highest compliment.
Tom Colicchio, not a man prone to hyperbole, calls it a massive slap in the face of flavor. The technique of the smoking oil over the aromatics created a perfect textural contrast. Laurence secures his second consecutive elimination challenge wins, cementing his status as the frontrunner.
He is a juggernaut. But the joy of the top tier is quickly overshadowed by the critiques of the bottom.
It gets so rough here.
Let's talk about Sherry. She serves her green curry. For context, a green curry derives its color and heat from fresh green chilies pounded into a paste with aromatics like galangal, lemongrass, and makrut lime leaves, then simmered with coconut milk.
Right.
The judges critique the dish, claiming there is far too much sauce and an overwhelming volume of vegetables, causing the fish to get lost in the bowl.
And here is where I must vehemently disagree with the judging panel. I am putting on my analytical chef's hat to defend Sherry.
Yes, defender.
By definition, a curry is a dish characterized by a complex, highly seasoned liquid sauce. It's meant to be abundant. The entire purpose of the coconut milk broth is to soak into the accompanying rice. To penalize a curry for being too saucy is a fundamental misunderstanding of the dish's architecture. It is like critiquing a soup for being too wet. I believe the judges evaluated the dish through a Western lens of protein-centric plating, rather than respecting the traditional structure of a Thai curry.
I am so glad you said that. Justice for sherry sauce. It felt like a completely unfair metric.
That's all.
But the judge's ruling stands. Which brings us to the final two. The absolute nadir of the episode.
Seeger and Duyen.
Seeger and Duyen. Seeger presents a baked spotted base resting on a bed of braised lentils, accompanied by a pepper sofrito, dates, and a cardamom vinaigrette.
The judges are visibly underwhelmed. The primary issue is structural cohesion. Kristen points out that the fish, having been baked under the salamander, which is a high-intensity, open-faced overhead broiler used in commercial kitchens, lacked any definitive crust or aggressive seasoning. It was completely bland.
Just a sad piece of fish.
Conversely, the lentils were hyper-flavored. The dates made them cloyingly sweet, and the cardamom added a potent, almost astringent medicinal quality.
Danielle Brooks noted that the palate is overwhelmed. Tom Colicchio tells Seeger that the dish is entirely disjointed. It desperately required a sauce to act as a bridge between the aggressively seasoned lentils and the barren piece of fish.
And listeners, Snark Squad, I need you to mentally prepare yourselves for the sequence of events that follows.
Because this moment enters the pantheon of elite Bravo history. This is the exact type of disrespectful petty chaos that Joan and Felicia thrive on.
Seeger is standing there. He listens to Tom Colicchio, a man with multiple James Beard Awards, a titan of the culinary industry, explain that his dish lacked a cohesive liquid element. And Seeger looks Tom dead in the eye, without a trace of irony, and says,
I thought the spoon would do that.
I literally had to rewind it 3 times.
I physically left my body. I had to stand up and walk a lap around the living room. I thought the spoon would do that. The sheer, unmitigated gall. He looked at the head judge and essentially stated, the flavor bridge you are looking for is the physical utensil. Just scoop it all up together, you idiot.
I cannot breathe.
We have to analyze the psychology of this response. It is a textbook ego defense mechanism. When faced with an undeniable critique of his culinary logic, rather than accepting the flaw, Seeger externalized the blame onto the judge's mechanical ability to eat the food.
He essentially gaslit the judging panel about the function of silverware.
He did. It was simultaneously the most legendary comeback ever uttered at judge's table and an act of absolute competitive suicide.
The reaction shots were cinematic art. Gail Simmons stares at him, her face completely devoid of amusement, and just drops a single word. Sassy.
The disdain dripping from that word. And Tom, you could see the vein pulsing in Tom's temple. You know, he wanted to leap across the table and physically dismantle Seeger's prep station. It was magnificent television.
It was a catastrophic breach of the contestant-judge social contract, but miraculously, Seeger's insolence did not send him home.
No, it didn't. Because Duyen had to present her conchua. The judges taste the hot and sour broth and agree it is highly complex, bright, and harmonious. But then, Tom picks up his knife and attempts to portion the spotted base.
And the knife simply stops.
It won't glide through the flesh. The fish is so severely undercooked that it is practically still swimming in the tamarind broth. Kristen looks up, and the air leaves the room. Because Duyen is a titan, she's a massive fan favorite.
But serving raw poultry or fish on a cooking competition is the ultimate unforgivable sin.
It really is.
It is the ironclad rule of culinary reality TV. You can have a disjointed concept. You can throw off the acid balance. You can even deliver profound sass regarding a spoon. But if you serve raw, potentially pathogenic protein, you are immediately eliminated. It is a massive liability.
A raw piece of fish has an entirely different, highly unappealing texture. It is chewy, stringy, and cold in the center. All of Duyen's prior quick-fire victories, all her strategic brilliance, evaporated the moment that knife failed to cut through the base.
Kristen delivers the fatal blow and tells Duyen to pack her knives. And the way Duyen exits, it broke my heart.
She doesn't offer a tearful monologue about following her dreams. She doesn't hug her competitors. She knows exactly what she did wrong. She is furious with her own hubris. And as she turns and walks out of the kitchen, she just quietly murmurs to herself, "Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
That repeated
Yeah.
is the sound of a fiercely intelligent woman mentally replaying her timeline, pinpointing the exact second she ruined her chances, and already plotting how to aggressively dominate Last Chance Kitchen.
It was a stoic, devastating exit. We lost Mama Duane. The dynamic of the house is fundamentally altered now.
It really is.
I am genuinely mourning the loss of her sideline commentary. Who is going to weaponize the names of eliminated chefs now?
Yeah.
Who is going to buy groceries for the competition just to ensure a fair fight?
It is a dark hour on the Snark side.
It is.
It is.
But we must process our grief through analysis, which organically brings me back to our earlier conversation about our retirement home queens. Based on Duyen's incredibly icy exit, it makes me wonder who would Joan and Felicia actually root for in this cast?
Oh, applying the assisted living matrix to the Top Chef roster. It's a fascinating thought experiment. We have witnessed the romance, the breakdowns, and the insubordination. If Joan and Felicia were placing bets using their bingo winnings, where does their loyalty lie?
Let's analyze Joan first. I am firmly convinced that Joan would completely ignore the competitive metrics and legally adopt Laurence.
You think so?
Yes. Joan is a traditionalist. She would hear Laurence's confessional about carefully steaming a fish for his wife on their first date in China, pouring the hot oil to show his devotion, and she would completely melt. Joan loves the narrative of a man using his skills to provide and court a woman. She would be knitting Laurence a scarf before the commercial break ended.
That is a valid read on Joan's romantic inclinations, but I think you are severely underestimating her cutthroat nature.
Wait, really?
Did you not observe the sheer aggression with which she was playing gin rummy? Joan possesses a ruthless streak. I genuinely believe Joan would respect Duyen. Joan would hear Duyen casually threaten to phone a friend during a stressful challenge, and she would cackle.
Okay, wait, you're right.
Duyen does not apologize for her desire to obliterate her enemies, and Joan respects unapologetic power.
That is a brilliant sociological read. Duyen is essentially the kitchen embodiment of Joan's nursing home persona. But what about Rhoda? We have to discuss how the retirement home would process Rhoda's deeply emotional monologue about being over 40, unmarried, and lacking children.
Oh, it would be a bloodbath.
You think they'd be mean?
Felicia would have absolutely zero empathy for Rhoda's existential crisis. Felicia would watch Rhoda weeping over her lack of a husband and yell at the television screen.
Oh my God, she would.
She would say, well, if you didn't spend 90 hours a week perfecting a tamarind vinaigrette, you might have time to go to a bar. Get on Bumble. Joan and Felicia operated in an era where securing a marital partner was the primary directive and career ambition was secondary. They would view Rhoda's tears over corn as entirely self-inflicted. It would be a toxic, deeply unsympathetic viewing experience.
I would literally have to mute the television to protect Rhoda's spirit. It would be so harsh. But the ultimate litmus test, Seeger. How do Joan and Felicia react to, I thought the spoon would do that?
I will stake my reputation on this. Felicia would become a hardcore Seeger apologist.
No way.
Not because she respects his culinary vision, but entirely for the insubordination. Felicia thrives on watching authoritative men get slightly inconvenienced. She would look at Tom Colicchio's stunned, angry face, and she would applaud.
She would. She would absolutely adopt Seeger's phrase as her new weapon against the nursing staff. Excuse me, orderly, I thought the spoon would feed me this pudding. He would be her chaotic king.
She absolutely would weaponize the spoon quote, which actually perfectly transitions us into evaluating the culinary output itself, because I want to assign an emotional aura, a spiritual energy to the specific dishes we saw tonight. Let's look at the most dramatic plate.
Yes. Analyzing the food not by taste, but by the psychological weight it carried in the narrative. Let's review the primary nomination.
Okay, run through them.
Nomination 1, the taco of audacity. Jonathan's single beer-battered fish taco. The emotional aura of this plate is pure, unadulterated swagger that actually pays out. It is the guy who shows up to a black tie wedding in a wildly printed suit and somehow looks better than the groom. Massive risk, executed with a smirk.
Nomination 2, the romantic flex. Laurence's Cantonese steamed fish. The emotional energy of this dish is a 1990s rom-com climax. It is John Cusack standing outside a window holding a boombox, except the boombox is a bamboo steamer. It is calculated, precision-engineered emotional manipulation designed to make judges weep.
Nomination 3, the sassy lentils. Seeger's dry base resting on overly sweet lentils, relying heavily on the structural integrity of a spoon.
Iconic.
The emotional energy here is a teenager rolling their eyes and dramatically slamming their bedroom door. It is petty, it is defiant, it is deeply flawed, but it birthed a quote that will outlive the season.
And the final nomination, the tragic broth, Duyen's conchua, a beautifully complex, harmonious hot and sour soup entirely ruined by a dense piece of raw, rubbery fish.
So sad.
The emotional aura is a Greek tragedy. It is having all the necessary tools for greatness, but allowing a single moment of hubris regarding timing to cause your absolute downfall.
The tragic broth physically pains me to think about. But we have to crown a winner. Which plate of food had the biggest psychological impact on the episode?
Well, I am an analytical viewer. I usually respect the strategic execution of a dish like Laurence's romantic fish. But from a purely dramatic, chaotic, Bravo-centric perspective, the title undeniably belongs to the sassy lentils.
You're going with the lentils.
The dish itself was a failure, but it spawned a cultural moment. That specific plate of food forced the head judge to contemplate his own existence and the mechanical purpose of silverware. It dismantled the hierarchy of the tasting table. The sassy lentils win.
I have to agree. The cultural lexicon shifted because of those lentils. But speaking of cultural shifts, we need to return to the debate that sparked this entire evening. Our reality TV golden era debate. We touched on it earlier, but we need to definitively break this down.
Let's establish the eras. We have the VH1 era, the mid-2000s Flavor of Love ecosystem. We have the 2000s MTV era, the Real World, Jersey Shore. We have modern Bravo, the highly produced Housewives network. And we have this streaming reality era, Love is Blind, Too Hot to Handle.
I am going to passionately defend my thesis that the VH1 era is the undisputed peak of the medium, because it was the only era where the participants had zero awareness of longevity. They were operating purely on instinct.
It was very instinctual.
Bestie, people were giving themselves unhinged monikers like Toasty and Hoops. They were engaging in physical altercations while severely hungover, wearing stilettos on a muddy obstacle course. You could never greenlight those shows today.
The legal departments would intervene immediately.
Exactly, but it was raw, unpretentious, and it gave us Tiffany Pollard, who basically invented modern internet reaction culture.
I acknowledge the cultural magnitude of Tiffany Pollard. However, I will argue that the MTV era was structurally superior for psychological mess.
Tell me why.
VH1 was still a competition show. There was an artificial goal of winning the affection of a D-list celebrity. MTV simply placed highly volatile strangers in a confined space and let human nature rot. Watching the Jersey Shore cast try to navigate the complex social dynamics of a boardwalk while actively destroying their own livers was a masterpiece in lived-in mess. You could practically smell the hairspray and regret through the television screen.
Okay, hairspray and regret is a compelling argument. But let's look at the ecosystem we live in now. Modern Bravo, the Scandival of it all. You argued earlier that it's sophisticated, but isn't it just too sterile?
It isn't sterile, it's a different genre entirely. Modern Bravo is a long-form soap opera featuring actual human beings. The mess is calculated, but the emotional fallout is real because these people have been on our screens for a decade.
I guess the history matters.
A housewife planning a takedown at a charity dinner is strategic, but the tears at the reunion are real because their real-life businesses and marriages are crumbling. It transcends television and becomes actual pop culture news.
But the calculation ruins the authenticity, which is exactly why I despise the current streaming era. These Netflix shows are high concept and bingeable, but 90% of the cast members are modulating their voices and practicing their crying angles because their only goal is a fast fashion sponsorship.
Which proves my point that the MTV and VH1 stars could never survive today. If you put the cast of Rock of Love on a Netflix server, the internet would have them deplatformed and canceled before the opening credits finished rolling. Today's cancel culture has forced reality stars to self-produce.
It is a tragedy. We traded lawless authenticity for ring lights and brand safety. Give me a giant clock necklace over an Instagram Notes app apology any day of the week.
We will clearly never agree on this because the slow burn architectural ruin of a Bravo friendship is my preferred form of entertainment. But speaking of structural integrity, we need to cycle back to our snacks because this street corn dip is almost gone and it is time for our snack ranking spiral.
Yes. Because as we have thoroughly established, you cannot process this level of psychological manipulation without fuel. Let's set the criteria. Category 1. Best reality TV snack. It must be something you can consume mindlessly while your jaw is dropped, but it cannot structurally interfere with the viewing experience.
I will take the lead. My definitive best reality TV snack is popcorn with M&Ms aggressively mixed in while the popcorn is still hot.
Ooh, solid choice.
It provides the perfect sweet and salty matrix. You can grab a handful without breaking eye contact with the television when a wine glass is thrown across a restaurant. It is texturally satisfying, and the chocolate provides the immediate glucose spike needed to process sudden betrayals.
That is a highly respectable classic theater choice.
Yeah.
But I'm going to push back and say that popcorn is too passive. My best reality TV snack is exactly what we were eating, a dense, complex dip. Whether it's a layered taco dip or a bubbling spinach artichoke concoction.
Defend the dip.
Reality TV is a marathon, and you require sustenance. A dip forces you to pace yourself, and crucially, it provides a prop. When someone says something absolutely out of pocket, like Seeger's spoon comment, you can dramatically pause with a fully loaded tortilla chip suspended halfway to your mouth for maximum comedic effect.
I have to admit the dramatic chip hold is a highly effective viewing technique. Okay, category 2. Worst reality TV snack. What food actively degrades the viewing experience?
What's yours?
For me, it is entirely auditory. Anything excessively crunchy, baby carrots, thick-cut kettle chips, hard pretzels. If I have to activate the closed captions because the internal acoustic reverberation of my own chewing is drowning out a whispered argument in a back alley on Vanderpump Rules, that snack has failed its primary mission.
I completely agree with the auditory nightmare, but I am going to approach this from a logistical angle. The worst reality TV snack is anything that leaves a visible tactile residue on your fingertips. Cheetos, nacho cheese Doritos, buffalo wings.
Oh, the grease.
Listeners, if I am watching a dramatic, unexpected elimination like Duyen's raw fish disaster, I need my hands completely clean so I can immediately rage tweet my thoughts to the internet. I cannot be aggressively scrubbing fluorescent orange cheese dust off my phone screen while trying to articulate my grief. It is a functional nightmare.
The live tweeting logistics are a highly valid metric. Okay, final category. The emotionally healing snack. What is the specific culinary item you turn to when the episode goes dark? When your favorite chef packs their knives and you are sitting in the glow of the television mourning their exit, what actually heals you?
This requires zero hesitation, and it is deeply rooted in childhood psychology, macaroni and cheese. But specifically, I do not want a culinary masterpiece. I don't want artisanal, aged Gruyere baked with a toasted panko.
You want the box?
I want the heavily processed boxed version. I want the powdered cheese that glows a slightly radioactive, unnatural shade of orange. I want the nostalgia of a simpler time to coat my stomach and whisper that everything will be okay, even though Duyen's broth was ruined. It requires zero chewing effort. It is pure, unadulterated emotional spackle.
I understand the desire for regression, but you are leaning too heavily into the savory profile. When a reality TV tragedy occurs, you must shock your nervous system with sucrose.
A sugar crash.
The true emotionally healing snack is a pint of ultra-premium ice cream, specifically a flavor densely packed with structural obstacles like brownie chunks or cookie dough consumed directly from the carton with a spoon. You have to physically dig for the chunks. It becomes an archaeological dig of depression.
An archaeological dig of depression.
The extreme cold numbs the immediate pain, and the heavy influx of sugar and dairy releases the necessary endorphins to allow you to eventually sleep.
My friend, you are a dark, analytical poet of the dairy aisle. I think we have successfully mapped the complex dietary psychology of the Bravo viewer, and more importantly, I think we have adequately processed the trauma of week 10.
We survived the raw spotted bass. We survived the existential dread of the quickfire. We analyzed the sass, the hubris, and the culinary mechanics. We have emerged from the Abyss restaurant stronger and more informed.
We truly did. Snark Squad, we cannot thank you enough for spending your Tuesday with us, spiraling over thermal shock, reality TV sociology, and retirement home hierarchies. We love analyzing this mess with you.
But the discourse doesn't end here. We need your rulings on the debates we opened tonight. Please jump into the comments and tell us. Which reality TV era do you actually miss the most? Are you craving the lawless survivalism of VH1, or do you prefer the calculated lifestyle warfare of modern Bravo?
And we desperately need your snack rankings. What is your elite comfort food when the on-screen drama spikes your cortisol? Drop your recipes, drop your ice cream flavored profiles, and finally, Snark Squad. We need validation. Are Joan and Felicia correct? Does Top Chef actually belong on the Food Network? Is the psychological warfare too intense for a cooking competition, or is it the exact level of mess we deserve?
Please assure us that our viewing habits are justified. And while you are down there validating our life choices, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Send us your own messy stories, your own restaurant meltdowns, and your own Mother's Day brunch disasters. We read every single one.
Yes. Keep the chaos flowing. Thank you for being the absolute sharpest, funniest community on the internet. We adore you, Snark Squad.
And until next time,
Stay fed, stay messy, and we will see you on the Snark side.